All right. Thanks everybody for joining us tonight for our solar rooftop workshop as part of our Green at Home series. These workshops cover the steps on how to electrify your home. And then this presentation is being recorded, and we'll send you a copy of the recording next week, as long as the slides. And so all attendees, if you could please have your microphone turned off to ensure good sound quality. And then if you have any questions during the presentation, type them into the chat at any time. And then we'll have a portion at the end if you want to unmute your mic, and you can talk to Tom Cabot or Leslie Brown, our guest speakers. And then my colleague Leo will provide answers in the chat if you guys have questions in the chat. Yeah. So a little bit about Actera. Our mission is to bring people together to create local solutions for a healthier planet. And our focus is addressing climate change with a priority on equity. And we're located in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1970. And then our sponsor for this workshop today is Peninsula Clean Energy. They are San Mateo County's official electricity provider. They provide cleaner energy at lower rates. So Peninsula Clean Energy is an essential part of the fight against climate change in our communities. And we'll be learning about their programs in detail later in the presentation. And so I'd like to welcome our guest speakers for this evening. We have Tom Cabot, who is a Sunwork board member and an energy engineer with a utility background. And then we'll also have Leslie Brown, who is the director of account services at Peninsula Clean Energy. And she'll also be talking after Tom Cabot about Peninsula Clean Energy programming. Without further ado, Tom Cabot, you can go ahead and take it away.
You're still muted, Tom.
You're muted, Tom. Are you able to unmute yourself, Tom? You're still muted, Tom.
Maybe pull back control, Irvin. He might, the mouse might be trapped doing weird stuff.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Now, yeah, now I can unmute and all right. Let's get to the first slide. Well, sorry about that, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I'm Tom Cabot, a volunteer with sunwork.org. We're a nonprofit that trains volunteers to install low-cost solar in the Bay Area and on the Central Coast. We've been doing that for about a dozen years, and we've trained about 2,500 volunteers in how to do that and learned a bunch about solar along the way. So hopefully I'll be able to share some of that with you. Our mission is to make solar and decarbonization more affordable and widespread with the help of these trained volunteers. And then we focus, for solar, we focus on homeowners with low monthly electric bills, typically under $100 a month is what it takes to qualify for us. And the reason we're focusing on that smaller end of the spectrum is because the rest of the solar market focuses on the larger electric users and putting in even bigger systems. But we will do solar for customers if they have EVs and bills that are under about $140 a month after we subtract out the electric vehicle usage, or also solar for homes who are getting heat pump water heaters. And then we also produce or do the solar installations for various types of nonprofits like churches or homeless shelters, preschools, various nonprofits, including the Boys and Girls Club, things like that. So because of our nonprofit structure and the use of volunteer labor, typically we're able to install solar at about 20 to 33% less than other contractors. So it's a pretty good deal for people. And now we're installing these very efficient heat pump water heaters that are like a backwards refrigerator that takes heat out of the garage and jacks that heat up to a high temperature and puts it into the tank of water. And so those are replacing natural gas use. All right, but the focus of tonight's session is all about solar. So why go solar? You know, lots of reasons. There's the money saving reasons, like save on the utility bills and to avoid future utility price increases by locking in a bunch of your energy that you're making on your own roof and increasing the property value. But also there's environmental benefits. Those have gotten a lot smaller because of the clean energy policy of Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy and Palo Alto utilities, all these around us. Those advanced utilities have very carbon neutral electricity now. When we started at Sunwork, it was before all those policies, and our mission was to get more solar installed in order to push out dirty utility power. Now there's clean utility power. The environmental benefits are smaller. It just means fewer ground-mounted panels, say out on solar farms somewhere. So we're really localizing the panels. And then also, you know, people are interested in that. They have like a technology interest, getting it into solar and EVs and making advances. And then there's also some interest in backup power. So there are ways to configure a solar system so it can provide more resiliency. Well, basically, the question of how does solar work, we've got the sun shining on the solar cells, dislodging electrons that go and make direct current. So current that flows in one direction in a loop through the inverter. And then this inverter is the electronics that converts that direct current power, kind of the same kind of power that comes off a regular battery. It converts it into alternating current, AC. And then that feeds it back in through the electric panel and back behind the electric meter. The existing electrical panel is used, and it can then distribute the solar electricity anywhere in the house. And the PG&E meter can still spin forwards when you're using energy from the utility, say at night, and backwards when you're producing extra energy more than you use, and leftovers are going to PG&E. And then the utility, the power from the utility is automatically provided night and during the day whenever your demand exceeds your solar production. So the way to get a maximum easy solar that is solar that fits on your existing electric panel bus bars. So here's the electric panel again. The bus bars just refers to these two metal bars inside the panel that distribute the electricity. And if you had, say, a 100 amp sized electric panel, then you can fit 5 or 6 kilowatts of solar panels up on the roof, and they can be facing in multiple directions. And then the inverter that I told you about, it can take in the power from all those panels and convert it to the 240 volt AC power, but it's limited at about 3.8 kilowatts for this kind of maximum easy size. And that's the amount that we're allowed to feed back on a 20 amp breaker into the electric panel. And then sometimes if all the solar is facing one direction, like it's all on one surface of the roof, then at noon in some clear days, there's some clipping because there might be a 5th kilowatt or a 6th kilowatt of power that doesn't fit through this 4 kilowatt inverter. But the beauty of that is you can use your existing electric panel, even if it's just a 100 amp panel, and not have to spend the $4,000 or $5,000 to upsize the panel and maybe even upsize that electric line. And this would all work. It complies with the 120% rule, we call it, where you can get 20 amps of power from the solar inverter and 100 amps of power from the utility grid coming in from the other side. The PG&E meter still spins backwards, And PG&E provides this really valuable balancing service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So one thing to consider is changes to your electricity usage. And you might want to think about that before going solar. So there are things you may want to look at, more efficient appliances where you can reduce your usage, or really the important thing nowadays is to consider how you might increase your usage, maybe with an electric vehicle, and really instead of reducing your electric use, really reduce your fossil fuel use. So that's why we started, Sunworks started to incorporate electric heat pump water heaters as one of the things we offered. But it's best to install enough solar to cover your future needs up front. So that's why we want to start thinking about this early. And so, you can make an electrification plan before going solar. That might make sense. So to do that, you'd be selecting low power equipment to meet your needs and stay on your electric panel. And that saves you the $5,000 cost of upsizing your electric panel. The key items to think about there are using, say, either a 20 amp electric vehicle charger circuit that can give you about 39,000 miles a year of EV charging if you're doing it 8 hours a night, or using controlled EV charging. EVSE means electric vehicle service equipment. So having it on a controller that pauses it if it so it can fit on the panel and not make you need a new panel. The next thing to think about is using a heat pump, HP there, and having it sized at 3 tons or smaller. And a ton is an abbreviation for 12,000 BTUs per hour. And so these high quality heat pumps, kind of right sized for your house, they can keep a 2,000 or 2,500 square foot house nice and comfy without being too large. And then at Sunwork also, we end up really focusing on using 15 amp heat pump water heaters, or we're also looking at the new 120 volt heat pump water heaters that take less power, so they fit easily on the panel. And then using maybe either a heat pump clothes dryer or a combination machine that does both the washing and the drying in one machine. And so it doesn't need an extra circuit. All these things that I listed here are ways to use your existing panel to get it fully electric without having to upsize. In the future, some folks in a San Francisco company are working on making a 120 volt plug-in cooking range that has a battery inside to meet all that peak cooking needs. So anyway, those are some of the interesting ways to stay on the electric panel, or you can upsize it if you've got an extra $4,000 or $5,000. So before going solar, the code lets you, the electric code lets you look at your historic peak usage in the biggest hour of the year. And that helps define the remaining panel space you can use for other electrification. So looking at that highest hourly usage and then subtract 120% of that highest usage from the panel capacity. And that tells you the remaining amp space or kilowatt space in the panel. But once you put in solar, the code doesn't let you look at that way anymore. The reason is because the solar kind of distorts all the utility readings that you get. And so it's harder to tell exactly what the usage was. But from studies I've been doing and others have been doing, we're finding most homes are only using about 30% of their panel capacity. So they have more room to add more electrification. It may look like your panel's full of circuits, but a lot of those circuits really aren't doing too much. So but the code has, if you do go and get your solar already, the code does have another more rigorous calculation method for how to figure out how much electrification you can do once you have solar. The other thing to look at in solar is what is your roof condition and the type of roof you have. And with solar, it makes sense, when you're thinking about doing it, to have a roof that's in good condition. So it has, say, 15 or more years of remaining life. That way you don't have to put up solar and then just a couple years later take it off and re-roof because your roof is worn out, and then put the solar back on. Because that little adventure of taking the solar off and putting it back on again costs about $600 per kilowatt of solar. just in the labor cost to take it off and then reinstall it again. And so that adds about almost a penny per kilowatt hour to the lifetime cost of the solar, which isn't that much, but if you can avoid it, it's nice to avoid, makes it even more economic. So here are all the types of roofs that we run into out there, and they're listed in order from the easiest to install solar on is composite shingle. And that arrow is going towards more expensive and more expensive or difficult roofs to deal with. But luckily, in our area, there are many homes that are this composite shingle looking kind of like this. And then there's a lot of modified bitumen roofs looking like this kind of flat rolled out roof that are sealed. Those aren't too hard to deal with. There's also standing seam metal roof. And then there is a kind of a plastic membrane. It's a bright white membrane roof. And so those can also be worked with and things glued on them. But at Sunwork that I volunteer with, we tend to focus on these 4 easiest types of roofs, but there are other solar and roofing contractors out there who can do solar on these more difficult roofs. We just usually don't want to get our volunteers up on these more difficult roofs and maybe have them crack your nice Spanish tile or something like that. That's why we stay away from those. But there's a couple of pictures. That's like a slate roof there. All right. There various electric or solar electric panel types. The industry has been consolidating more and more. They're still polycrystalline and monocrystalline silicon panels. And then these come in different frame colors for different aesthetics. Panels tend to have a 25-year power warranty, and the efficiency of these solar cells has been getting better and better over the years. They're up to 22% efficient. It's not uncommon these days. All right, so recapping the 2 things to consider doing before solar, and you don't have to do these, but it kind of makes sense to think about doing them. One is consider making an electrification plan that can help you stay on your present solar panel if your present electric panel. If your electric panel, if your electric panel is over 60 amp size, and so 100 amp size is very common in our area. That's enough with a plan where you can do your whole house in fully electric if you're careful about picking your appliances. And then with a 200 amp panel, it's enough to do your whole house electric and be sloppy at it. You can pick bigger, sloppier appliances instead of being careful. But the other thing is to consider replacing the roof if it sounds like it's going to interfere with solar timing, and you want to save that roughly 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour, $600 per kilowatt of labor to remove and replace it a few years down the road. I mentioned before that these direct current, these DC solar panels also need to have inverters. The inverter that conditions the DC electricity to change it from being direct current into alternating current and matched up exactly to the grid. So it's in sync with the grid. So there are different inverter options. There are central inverters, and they're useful on medium to large solar systems. Say solar systems over about 1.5 kilowatts, say over 5 panels. But those ones don't perform that well if there's partial shading, because when there's shade on one part of that type, it affects the whole system. And so they can balance for 2 different directions the solar might be facing. Another type, this is the type I have on my home. It's micro inverters, where there's an inverter mounted on the rack behind each panel. So this panel will have another of these little inverters, its own little inverter just for it, mounted behind it. And so then all the solar panels will operate kind of independently. If one gets shaded, that's just a problem for that one, and the others are going at full tilt. So that one's good if you've got a kind of a tree that's going to run a shadow across different panels at different parts of the day, like a tall, thin tree. And then a third case is kind of a compromise between the two. It's a central inverter with a DC direct current optimizer. And SolarEdge is one of the brands that offers that type of system. And so it can be done with a central inverter, but still allow panels to perform at peak performance without the shade. And then the shaded panels just have their shaded performance, but they don't affect other panels in the series. The other nice thing about inverters is that they often are set up to provide monitoring information and feed that back to you, so you can get outputs that show you the amount of solar production from your system in the different months of the year. And in this case, you can see this house had very low December and January production, but much higher summer production. So it was probably a set of panels that were kind of at a very shallow slope. So the low winter sun kind of bounced off them, didn't really hit them too much, but the high summer sun up at a higher angle really produced on those panels. All right. Sometimes we look at what the sizing issues and how it depends on the roof direction, because the sun here in our hemisphere spends most of its time in the south part of the sky. We've got a little compass here with north and south, east and west shown. And so if you've got the solar system facing south, you get about 100% of the maximum production in our area, which is about 1,600 kilowatt hours per year for each kilowatt of solar on the roof. So we could even divide the kilowatts out of it and say each watt of power produces 1,600 watt hours of energy. So just remember that kind of ratio of 1,600 hours per year of full load production out of it. Then if you were facing towards the southwest, instead of due south, the performance only drops off about 3%. So that's not much at all. If you're facing southeast, there's a little more morning fog in our area. So the production is off a couple percent more. It's at 95%, still very good. And here facing due west, it's at about 87% of what it would be facing south. So that's still pretty good. And about 85% if it was due east, just getting that morning sun mostly and then losing it in the afternoon. Another way to, let me see that. Okay, the other interesting issue is our time of use rates, which tend to have higher rates in the afternoon when the sun has moved from the morning position over to the west in the afternoon. And if your system is facing towards the west and southwest, it's picking up more of that afternoon energy and producing it during the time when we've got higher retail electric rates to push back against. Oh, and then also a flat roof produces about 89% as much as a well tilted south-facing roof. All right, so just kind of going over it again in a slightly different perspective, if we take a look at what is the cost of a solar system after the 30% tax credits that are in effect now and for the next 10 years of installations, and then take that cost of the system, say if it was $10,000 minus the 30% would be $7,000, and divide by the production of the panels facing south, it might be 7 cents per kilowatt hour is the cost of solar energy over the 25-year life of the panels. Even counting the slight aging degradation that goes on and dust and dirt type of things. So 7 cents a kilowatt hour coming out of there versus electric rates on the order of 30 cents a kilowatt hour retail is a very good deal. And then facing southwest, 7.5 cents. And that's not bad, especially if you have time of use rates, which were higher. What if they were 40 cents in the afternoon? Then it's a good deal to be paying 7.5 cents for solar to offset some 40-cent utility power. In the morning, if you've got a southeast facing system, it might be producing energy at 8 cents, and a west facing one might be 9 cents. Again, it's fallen off a little bit, same as the other chart. And then here, a flat roof might be 8.5 or 9 cents on its production. So that's kind of a way to look at solar production versus orientation. All in all of those prices are much more affordable than 30-cent grid power. So the way the utility billing works for solar customers, you've got your free sunshine falling on your solar panel that you've already paid for. It's making that direct current energy. The inverter's converting that to alternating current output. That's going into your breaker box. And then which your breaker box is connected to the utility meter. And so any energy you're not using that's put out by the solar system flows through the utility meter backwards into the utility grid. And then anytime you're using more energy in the house than the solar is producing, the extra comes back from the grid through your meter and into your home. And the meter can run just forward and backwards. And it can also, the time of use meters can keep track of what period of the day are you using the energy in, so they can keep it tracked by period. So net energy metering is what this policy situation is called. And you hear it abbreviated as NEM. So when you hear people talking about NEM 2 and NEM 3, those are different policy treatments coming up for how to treat the situation of energy flowing back and forth across the utility meter. In NEM 2, and that's the net energy metering that applies right now, and it applies at least through the end of December. You would be able to sell electricity at retail costs minus 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour for what are called non-bypassable charges. And those non-bypassable charges are the charges we pay for public purpose programs. And public purpose programs are low-income assistance programs and things like that. In PG&E territory, there's also a $10 per month minimum charge from PG&E for the delivery services. So for this, maintaining the grid connection and the ability to flow energy back and forth. So regardless of how much energy I use at my house and how little it is, I always have a $10 a month minimum bill, and that's $120 a year minimum. And in my house in the winter, I'm using more energy than I produce. And so I end up consuming all those minimum charges. They may have accumulated, I've paid them, but I've gotten credit for delivery services while paying them each month. And then in the winter, I'm using a bunch of energy and I'm kind of unbanking all those credits and using them to pay for the delivery services I get in the winter. All right, so more about the solar economics in PG&E territory. The typical payback period for solar depends on a lot of factors. It's anywhere from 4 to 12 years is how long it takes for the savings from having a solar system to pay for the cost of the system. And that's going to vary on a number of factors, like the system size and how much shading there is. The more shading, the longer it'll take to pay back. The available roof direction, and I kind of went over that in the prior couple of slides, that if you're facing far off of south, then it can reduce the production. And then it's pretty sensitive to what is the NEM policy, that net energy metering policy. There's currently NEM 2, and then I think NEM 3 may start as early as sometime in January or winter of 2023. And then the rate plan that you're on, and there may be people here from several different utilities, but the rate plan you choose has different rates for different times of day. And so that can affect the value of production from the solar system. And so here's a couple of examples, say a 5 kilowatt system that might be 14 or 15 panels. It might cost, say, $11,000 to $15,000 before the tax credits. And so that's about $2.20 a watt to $3 a watt. You'll hear people talk about these. Should have said per watt. Sorry about that. That K is a typo. I left that in there accidentally. But after tax credits that are 30%, it's the 11,000's down to 7,700 and the 15,000's down to $10,500 cost. And then in this example, the estimated savings for a good south-facing unshaded spot might be $2,000 per year of savings if the electric rate you were pushing against was 25 cents a kilowatt hour. And so that payback period would be the $7,700 divided by 2,000 is about 4.5 years maybe. And then, it could be a little longer for the other system that costs a little more. And so that's the payback period calculation under NEM 2. And we think the way they're trying to structure NEM 3, which is undergoing policy discussions at the California Public Utilities Commission, they're looking at making payback periods. If solar was $3.30 per kilowatt, they're trying to make payback periods on the order of 9 years or so for NEM 3. It's one of the guidelines they're using in designing it. So the solar economics, I mentioned we have several different utilities at play in the area. So there may be audience members who are from Palo Alto or Santa Clara. Both of those cities own their own utilities. And so they have local NEM, local net energy metering policies and programs that don't overcompensate solar slop. So they are a little tougher on your excess solar. So it makes sense in those two cities to really size your system to try to self-consume the solar. For example, Palo Alto's paying about 10.8 cents for excess solar that's produced. Their rate is designed to be fair and not shift costs onto the non-solar customers. And then City of Santa Clara is only paying 5.2 cents per kilowatt hour that flows out for electricity back on the grid. That kind of underestimates or undervalues transmission savings. So doing some home electrification to self-consume that solar really helps improve the economics of solar. For example, driving 10,000 miles a year on an electric vehicle can be powered by adding 6 panels. And so that can have a quick payback of about 4 years. And then also for a 3-person household, adding a heat pump water heater can be another quicker payback, about 5 years. All right, and then at the Sunwork website, there's a link to Get Solar, and that might give you a way to get a customized estimate. Oops, there we go. We got the Inflation Reduction Act replaced our declining solar tax credits so that any system installed in 2022 this year gets a 30% tax credit, up from initially we thought it was going to be 26. Now it's a surprise 30%. And then the 30% tax credits stay in effect for installations happening in the next 10 years. But net energy metering will change over from 2.0 to 3.0, very likely in early 2023. And so it's more lucrative if you're able to install under NEM 2.0. And then I think, not sure the PUC has decided the exact how long they'll grandfather in those folks who get installed in NEM 2.0 time, but for a number of years they'll be grandfathered into that, and then eventually changing over to where they are no longer subsidized by the other ratepayers. got a couple of solar PV purchasing tips. One is you can go on solarreviews.com, which is kind of like a Yelp for solar, and see what folks have to say about the contractors in the area and look up contractors you might be interested in getting bids from. You can also look at energysage.com, and they have a listing of solar contractors. So it's a good place to check out. And Nextdoor and Angie's List. Also, that, be careful with contractors. One thing to know is that $1,000 is the maximum down payment you can be required to make in this kind of a contract. And then it makes sense to withhold a significant percentage of the payment until the job is all done and signed off by the city inspector, just to make sure there's motivation by the contractor to get it all done right. And then at Sunwork, we also have a resources page, and you can download a guide there. The installer should be managing all the working with your city and with PG&E. You can check out their contractor license and number and their insurance status. Ask them about that when you talk to them. And then there are panel eco ratings at a solar scorecard site. If you want to, some people want to be sure their panels are made in an eco-friendly way. And then if you have low income, you might want to check into Grid Alternatives. And Grid Alternatives is able in some census tract areas to provide free solar to households below certain incomes. And they do that with public purpose money. That's one of the uses of that 2.3 cents. Then one last thing about Sunwork, you can volunteer with Sunwork. That's how I got to know them, was just by volunteering. And then you get trained in how to do solar installation. They do a little 3-hour safety training class and solar basics. We'll probably do it again in February. It's a little online Saturday morning thing. After that type of class, then you can sign up if you feel like it to be on the list to get announcements of when we're doing solar installations around the Bay Area. And then you can pick one of those and schedule a time to show up. A lot of people pick the type that are going to be similar to the roof they have because they want to see how Sunworks doing this, and then maybe get ready to have it done on their own roof. Or sometimes our volunteers learn enough, they just do their own solar installation on their own roof. And that saves them even some more money. All right. So let me undo the control and turn it back over to Urban.
All right, thank you, Tom. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Leslie Brown, who's going to talk about Peninsula Clean Energy and a little bit more about the net metering.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Leslie Brown. I'm with Peninsula Clean Energy. I'm the Director of Account Services. I've been with Peninsula Clean Energy for about 6 years. And prior to that, I worked for the City of Santa Clara's electric utility, Silicon Valley Power. And Tom, I was so surprised when you said that the Santa Clara's net metering compensation rate is so low, because they changed that. That was not that low when I was there. That was my program. But how do I change the, perfect. Okay, thank you. So Peninsula Clean Energy, we launched in 2016. October of 2016 is actually when we first started serving customers. And then we had we enrolled customers a little bit at a time as they, came up with their solar net metering anniversaries. And then we had a mass enrollment of the rest of San Mateo County in April of 2017. So we enrolled between October 2016 and the end of 2017, we enrolled about 300,000 customers into our service. We are a generation provider, so we resource the electricity that PG&E ends up delivering to your home. So, and the way that our services come billed to you is actually on your PG&E bill. So we have an extra line item on the PG&E bill, we have an extra page in the PG&E bill, but what we're doing is we're replacing the generation services that PG&E was previously resourcing on your behalf. If you live in San Mateo County, we are now the provider that is signing those contracts. Our electricity is greener. It has a higher renewable content. It also costs a little bit less than what PG&E was otherwise providing to you. So that's the value proposition that we're bringing forward to San Mateo County. Since we launched service in 2016, there's been CCAs that really have exploded all over the Bay Area, and pretty much except for the municipal utilities, like Santa Clara, Palo Alto, in Alameda, in the East Bay, all of the greater San Francisco Bay Area is served by a CCA, which is pretty exciting. What are we doing with that savings that we're providing savings for you? We're also investing in programs for electrification in buildings, electrification in transportation, and improving resiliency for our customers. Tonight, we're here to talk a little bit more about our solar net metering program, though. So for Peninsula Clean Energy or any CCA provider, if you have a solar system on your home, the billing ends up working a little bit differently than it does if you're a bundled PG&E customer. I'm just going to speak specifically for Peninsula Clean Energy. If any folks have a different CCA that's your provider, you definitely want to check in with the Net Energy Metering programs with your CCA, because we all have a slightly different program. But for Peninsula Clean Energy, what we're doing for our customers is, I like to call it buy low and sell high, because we're providing electricity to customers. If you're pulling energy off the grid, we're providing that electricity to you at a lower rate than PG&E would otherwise be providing it to you. We have a built-in 5% net discount that we're calculating our rates against. But if you are generating extra electricity, so if at the end of the billing cycle, you have pushed more kilowatt hours out to the utility than you have pulled off, we're going to credit you at the retail rate plus give you a bonus for that, a 1 cent per kilowatt hour bonus for those extra kilowatt hours. So when you buy electricity, we need to pull it from the grid. You can buy it low. And then when you push out excess energy from your solar system, we're going to give you a higher credit than you otherwise get from PG&E or that you need to buy from us. So this buy low, sell high. We roll those credits over on a month-to-month basis if you're earning extra credits. If you happen to be someone whose solar system does not generate all your electricity and you're consuming electricity on a monthly basis, we actually do a monthly trip on the generation side for us. So you'll get a bill on a monthly basis from Peninsula Clean Energy, but it'll be for just the difference in the electricity that you consumed in that month. For folks that are constantly generating more electricity, though, those credits will continue to roll forward. And if at the end of the April billing cycle, so if you're constantly pushing credit forward, at the end of the April billing cycle, we cash everybody out who has extra kilowatt hour or has extra credits on their bill if those credits are over $100. So if you have, $250 credit, $102 credit, $800 credit, whatever that amount is, we're going to cash it out and send you a check after that April billing cycle. If you have less than $100 in credit, you have like $75 in credit, we're going to roll that forward. And then ideally the next year, if all things are equal, you would have maybe $150 in credit, and then we would cash you out then. So again, like I said in the beginning, how the billing works, we have the generation that we're resourcing. We're contracting for this for providers in California, a little bit out of state. PG&E is delivering that electricity to your home like they always were previously to you as a customer, and you're getting one bill from PG&E that has our charges and PG&E's charges on it together. Now, the difference in the billing in what your experience is as a solar customer, if you have a third-party provider like the CCA, if you're a Peninsula Clean Energy customer, you still are going to have that same minimum connection fee with PG&E for the T&D charges. So it's that same $10 a month roughly that PG&E is charging. This is obviously under the NEM 2.0 rules, NEM 3 still to be determined. But you're going to pay that same minimum connection fee whether or not you're using electricity or pushing electricity back out to the grid. You're still going to have a true-up date with PG&E on an annual billing cycle. You're still going to have to pay for any excess energy that you pulled off of the grid, those transmission distribution charges, any other taxes and fees from PG&E on their side of the bill. You'll have to have that true up once a year with PG&E, but on the monthly, you're going to pay that monthly generation charges to Peninsula Clean Energy on a monthly basis. So currently right now, you had, bundled, if you're a bundled PG&E customer and your true up bill was, $800-900 for the year, and then you became a CCA customer, you would still likely have a true up with PG&E, but it would be maybe more like $400 or $500 because you'd be taking care of the generation part of that bill on a monthly basis with your CCA. How do we credit, customers? So throughout the year, we credit customers roughly the same with a retail credit going back and forth. But for the additional kilowatt hours, this is where the Peninsula Clean Energy program really shines. So if you're someone who's generating excess kilowatt hours from your solar system, right now, PG&E, when they do your true up, they're forced to recalculate those excess kilowatt hours at a lower rate. It's called the net surplus compensation rate. So it's a wholesale rate. It fluctuates month to month, depending on when your true up is. I've seen it go between like 2 cents, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. I think it's right now maybe around 4 cents a kilowatt hour is that excess, rate that they're going to credit you for any extra kilowatt hours that you generate on the annual basis. Like I said before, with Peninsula Clean Energy, we're going to credit you at the retail rate, plus we're going to give you a 1 cent per kilowatt hour bonus. And we're not going to recalculate that. That is our current program right now. Might that change in the future, potentially with NEM 3.0? It might, but right now we're not looking to change that. We're looking to keep that there for customers. We think that's a good value. And we like to acknowledge folks who've made that investment into their solar system, give them a little bit extra bonus if their system is overperforming. And like I said, and again, the cash out, if you have an extra kilowatt hours, if you're constantly generating more energy, we do a cash out on an annual basis after the April billing cycle for folks who generate more than $100 in credits. That's the end of the solar part of it, the net metering part of it. I would like to encourage you folks to visit our website though, pencleanenergy.com or peninsulacleanenergy.com. We've got a lot of great programs on there to support electrification. We have a 0% financing program that we just launched. It's not solar related, but it can help with other measures in your home, like a heat pump water heater, like an heat pump HVAC system, if you're looking to do other projects to lower your carbon footprint. I'm not sure how I turn this.
All right, thanks for a great presentation, Tom and Leslie. We'll get into questions that are still unanswered in the chat, and then if you guys want to come off mute, we'll have a portion for that after this. I just wanted to let you guys know about some upcoming events that we have at Actera, which are all virtual. December 7th, we have a lecture about building organizational engagement and advocacy. And then December 8th, we have a Young Professionals Happy Hour and a virtual tour of the local recycling center. December 14th, we have another Green at Home workshop. It's going to cover induction cooking if you want to install that in your house. And then lastly, on December 22nd, we have an online cooking class with Chef Kelvin. And we're going to be cooking a honey glazed Brussels sprouts with vegan mac and cheese. And then so you can sign up for these events at actera.org/events. And so I haven't been looking at the chat, but I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. I see that Tom was trying to answer some of the questions in the chat.
I think also Tom or Leslie, if you see any questions that you did answer in the chat, but you think would be good for everybody to hear, feel free to repeat the question. And the
Sure.
answer.
Yeah, thanks for the chance. Yeah, I saw a couple of good questions in there. One was somebody asking just what is Sunworks kind of geography, and so we work in San Mateo County, Santa Clara County, and the western part of Alameda County, kind of all along the bay up to El Cerrito and also down to Gilroy, et cetera. And then that's where we are in the Bay Area. And so one thing I look for when they send out the announcements of upcoming installations is where they're happening. Since I'm lazy, I like to go to the ones that be near my house. Somebody asked about, are there non-penetrating roof mounting systems? And I don't know of any really available at a residential level on flat commercial roofs. I've seen weighted ballasted systems. But I haven't seen anything really for single family residential homes. But I also don't have any worries about the kind of well sealed and well flashed mounting systems that we're putting on existing shingle roofs. I think they're pretty darn watertight. We don't hear about any problems with them. Oh, yeah, somebody was asking about what are the big obstacles we find in convincing people to go solar, and I don't really notice there are obstacles to convincing people to go solar. And with the clean energy being provided by folks like Peninsula Clean Energy, I'm not seeing a real urgency on my part to get anyone convinced to put in solar. Solar is really just something you do because you want to save money. I think, at least that's the way I see it but I have to admit, I am an engineer with a big utility background. So I just look at solar for what it is rationally, and it's a way for people to save money on their bills and shift costs onto other customers. But NEM reform is going to make that a little more fair between customer types. So we'll see that change coming up. The thing we have to work on as a society is how to make it easier for people to decarbonize their homes, because solar can arrive through your utility wires, but decarbonization is something you have to do in each house to replace the gas-fired equipment. And so you do need homeowner cooperation to replace the gas-fired equipment with good electric alternatives. Like in my house, we have a very comfortable electric heat pump that's super efficient and keeps us warm in winter, and suddenly gives us cooling in summer that we never had before with a furnace. So there's that coming up. What else? Oh, one person asked if it what they should do about solar installation, given they only had about 5 years left on their roof. And my response was, well, with the tax credits being extended now for a luxurious 10 years, it means there's time to wait and let your roof expire and replace it, and then put solar in the 5th or 6th year. So we no longer have that urge to rush, at least I don't, on the solar side. Yeah. So are there any other questions people want to ask?
I see a question in the chat from Peggy. She's asking if you can get a solar setup even though you rent.
Yeah, so that sounds like it'd be, on the property, it'd be between you and the landlord would be the one way to do that, is the landlord decides to do it. And then in other states, not so much in California, but in other states, they have developed some successful, what they call community solar programs, which would be a centralized solar plant where you could buy participation shares, like buy several panels worth of output from it. And then the utility credits you for the output of those several panels on your utility bill, even though the panels are at one address and your home is at another address. California has not really worked out good community solar rules yet, but they're taking another crack at it through legislation, I believe, this upcoming session. So that might be something to participate in and watch and see if you can help craft a better community solar policy for California.
Yeah, and then Rebecca also asks, sorry, go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was going to address Rebecca's question. She had brought up a good question here about adding a battery to an existing solar system. And that is definitely a roadblock. That is definitely an issue for folks. There are the installers out there that there's a challenge on adding a battery to an existing solar system. There are folks out there that are working through their existing clientele. Like I know we had a partnership with Sunrun for a while, and they were starting to work through like their existing Sunrun customers to extend an opportunity to add a battery to their system, but they were not interested in talking to anyone else. They weren't interested in talking to, somebody else installed your solar system. So I do think that that's definitely a roadblock, and maybe Tom, you have some other insights, or I don't know if that's something that Sunwork is looking to take on potentially, is adding just a battery component to existing solar for customers.
Yeah, so yeah, Sunwork, we're a little bit early in the battery stage. So we have our regular type of installation, and then we can also install it in a way that people are calling battery ready. And that's maybe about $1,000 more in the installation cost, and sets people up to be ready to have somebody come in and put a battery in at a later date. And then Sunwork, so far we've only installed a couple of batteries on nonprofits and none on single family homes. So we're just slowly learning about it, and we'll trying to work our way through the process. But
I do see Rebecca, I definitely feel for you there. Trying to add a battery to your system, it's a challenge. It's something we've had a lot of customers reach out to us about directly, and it doesn't right now. It seems like the installers that are doing battery systems are focused on selling a whole package of a new solar system with a battery versus trying to just sell a battery add-on to an existing solar system that's already, out there in the field.
Right, and I think it's because the battery system is controlled by a thing they call a gateway, and the gateway is a pretty sophisticated piece of equipment, and it's going to be probably replacing the inverter in the regular old solar system. And so this gateway might have its own inverter, or even two inverters inverting separately from the battery or the DC solar. So there are a bunch more variables, and so I can empathize with the contractors who want to install it all from the get-go, all as one integrated system.
I think we have time for one last question from Green Rita. And she says, if you have any experience with installation of the GAF roof shingles, they allow easy transfer of skills by traditional roofers.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't know anything about them.
All right. So if you guys have any more questions, my email is on the screen, and I think Mike, who works at Sunwork, his email is on the screen. Is that correct, Tom?
Right, and then actually probably the good address for Sunwork would be info@sunwork.org.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for people at Sunwork, info@sunwork.org. But with that, our workshop has come to an end. So thanks for everybody for being here. And if you have any more questions, just contact us. Our emails are on the screen. So thank you and have a good night, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you all.